2024 is a year of big endings and unexpected new opportunities. And here to discuss this with me is Zoe Cardiff, who is a professional astrologer, a graduate from the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, and a TikTok astrology superstar. Thank you so much for being here with us, Zoe.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to jump into 2024. It's a really interesting year.
Yeah, it's wild in terms of, I mean, we've had some wild years, especially since 2020, but this one's different. This one's wild in a completely new way. I think this is going to be a year that's going to be in the history books. Like people are going to write about this, people are going to refer back to this. This is going to be a year where everything shifts and becomes different.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really, I think, super consequential year and a really important, dramatic decade. It's a turning point. I mean, you can see that come up again and again with the transits that we're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this this doesn't end anytime soon. It is really like a transitionary decade. Really,
Yeah,
this doesn't we don't move out of this period of constant shifting and change and, turbulence and chaos on a global scale until really 2030. So, we're in it for the long haul, and this is just one of those years where big things are happening. They're not all bad, they're not all scary.
right.
A lot of them are really, really exciting, but it's definitely a big year of change.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So why don't we just kind of dive into this? But before we do, I just wanted to mention for those of you who aren't familiar with Zoe's work, she's a professional astrologer. I'm going to link her TikTok and her Instagram and also her link to book readings down in the description below. She also has 2024 astrology forecasts available for all of the zodiac signs. They're very detailed. They're, I'm sure, amazing because everything she does is awesome. So you definitely want to check those out too. And we can chat about that a little bit later as well. But yeah, so let's get into the 2024 forecast. So the first thing I definitely want to touch on here is this 29th degree energy because a lot of the outer planets, especially Pluto and Neptune, are just lingering at 29 degrees of the zodiac signs that they're in. And the 29th degree, for those who are not aware, is known as the anaretic degree. It's very volatile, it's very transitionary. It represents a period of turbulence and change. It represents a shifting away from one thing and into something new. And so having all of this 29-degree energy makes things very unstable in and of itself. And the first big thing we have, and I think that's happening right now still, is Pluto is at 29 degrees in the sign of Capricorn.
Yeah. And the 29th degree is really interesting, especially of the cardinal signs, of course, because it's so strong. But I think it's a degree of crisis too, because it's like we feel that we are at this turning point, and especially with the outer planets like Pluto, this big transpersonal planet that affects the collective so much, being at 29, it's not only that we are feeling it in our personal lives, but also like being at a collective turning point and collective crisis. So it's really interesting, intense energy.
Yeah, and it's definitely, you can feel it. Like there's something in the ether, something is about to shift, something is about to break, and it's just tangible right now.
Yeah, it's really anticipatory. Like there's almost a sense of urgency where we know that things
Yeah.
are changing and the old, Pluto at 29 Capricorn, the old structures are crumbling. And what comes next? So there's excitement, there's anticipation, but there's also fear that comes with that. So it is a pervasive energy, that Pluto at 29.
Oh yeah, it's definitely, it does feel like this is like the last chance. It's the
Yeah.
last chance to do something. It's just a question of what is that something? And that, question needs to be answered, I think, more on a personal level.
Mhm.
Because everybody's leaving something and moving into something new right now. That's just part of this transitionary phase that we're in. And with that Capricorn energy, it's kind of the end of the old paradigm, the old structures, the old hierarchies, the old rules, and the old boundaries that we used to adhere to. And that goes on the collective level and on the like personal level too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's felt like on such a wide macro scale, we can see it, but also in your personal life, in that Capricorn ruled area of your chart too. So it's huge. Well,
Absolutely.
no one on this earth will ever experience 29 degrees of Pluto at 29 Capricorn again, so
Unless you live to be like 250 years old.
right. And who knows, after Pluto in Aquarius, maybe
I
people
know.
are living. It sounds terrifying, but yeah, it's really this last chance, this last gasp, you know.
And we're going to be kind of like these hybrid robots after that, right?
Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. But that Capricorn energy is kind of like the old guard kind of dying out. You can feel that energy. And this could be like the end of like governments, corporations, like bigger ruling structures that have been in place for a very long time with this energy of Pluto being in the sign of Capricorn and moving away. I mean, last time we had Pluto at the end degrees of Capricorn was, the birth of the United States of America. So it was the end of something and also, it started to be the beginning of something else as well. So it is going to be a massive change, I think, for everyone here in the US, but also just globally.
Yeah.
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 And the other thing we have kind of going on here is Neptune. And so Pluto's spending December 20th through January 21st. I got to give people dates, so they're going to ask me.
Yeah.
At that 29th degree, it's going to come back into Aquarius, which we're going to talk about in just a second here. And then it's going to move back into Capricorn from September 2nd to November 19th. So it's going to be there for quite some time. But Neptune is going to be just sitting there at 29 degrees from May 3rd until September 3rd. That is a huge amount of time, a weird amount of time for such a weird planet to be at such a strange position. I feel like this is just going to be the most bizarre energy. How do you
Yeah.
feel about this?
I mean, Neptune is such a foggy and nebulous and planet that brings such confusion. And I think that on a collective level, we can, because Neptune is about to leave Pisces, it's at that 29th degree. It's sort of this, who are we as a collective? What have we learned from the last, how long has Neptune been in Pisces? 15 years?
Something along those lines. I think 14.
Like, what do we want to take into this next phase, once, and of course everyone doesn't know that this change is happening, but there's this feeling of, what ideas and attitudes and belief systems, philosophies, spiritual disciplines do we want to take into the future, and which ones just are not working for us, or do we not align with anymore? And I think like a pervasive feeling of maybe confusion, or even like bubbles bursting,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it'll be a really strange time in people's personal lives, as well as there has already been so much, like everyone has their own facts and their own information. And Neptune definitely, at that really critical degree, I think can make people so much more polarized into their beliefs. Um,
Yeah, it's definitely an energy of seeing what you want to see as opposed to what's really there, which is a very big contrast from that Pluto and Capricorn, which is very much about what's real and focusing in on that and exposing the reality of the situation. So we have these two competing energies sort of happening all at once this year, where on the one hand, it's about like doubling down on what's real, what's tangible, and doubling down maybe on the structures that do really work for us that we want to take with us. Like maybe we don't want to completely just throw the conventional way into the gutter and just like go into something super weird in Aquarius, right? There are certain things that we need to hold on to that we value that are more traditional, that are more conventional, that are more Capricornian. And then on that other end of the spectrum, we have that 29th degree of Neptune, which is just so all over the place, so intangible. And I think, yeah, we're going to see a lot of what you just said. Like people have their own facts, their own viewpoints. Everybody sees what they want to see. But also, I think this could relate to an influx in mental illness, which we've seen in the past few years due to a lot of the global events and the things that we've been subjected to as a society. I think this could be a lot more energy around that, a lot more energy around maybe addiction and substance abuse, which is also very Neptunian. There's something there with this where it's like, I don't know if you've noticed this but like when a planet moves from one sign to the next and it's at that like 28, 29 degrees, there's like a doubling down of that energy where
mm.
it's like more of it for some reason. Like it just you have to use it all up before it can move on.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a station almost,
Yeah.
like an exclamation point. But I think that you're right. And maybe, I mean, hopefully there's more focus on maybe like the opioid epidemic, and,
Yes.
the drug problems in America, as well as the mental health. And like there's
Yeah.
the loneliness epidemic. And the thing where I kind of hope that there is more focus on that, because with Pluto and Aquarius, Uranus moving into Gemini, there's a lot going on where like tech is just getting better and more immersive. And so people sort of like losing themselves, mm, connecting less with people. That's what makes
Yeah.
people lonely, especially young people, is they have a lot of like friends and activity online, but not like real interpersonal relationships. And so maybe that will be talked about, tackled, and just become a bigger theme with Neptune at that 29th degree, getting stronger, really looking at it in a way where like we can't not look at this problem, or these problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with Saturn being in the sign of Pisces as
Yeah,
well, like
yeah,
escaping into an alternate version of reality. That is
for sure.
such a Saturn and Pisces thing, which we totally need to get into in just a second here.
Yeah, no, the Saturn Neptune almost conjunction makes things even weird,
Yeah.
even weirder. Um, yeah,
All right. So we have Pluto leaving Capricorn. We have Neptune getting ready to leave the sign of Pisces. It won't leave until next year, but it's so, so close. And then we have Jupiter moving from Taurus to Gemini. So there's going to be a little bit of a 29-degree energy there. But the final thing that's kind of big is Uranus. It's not going to be at 29 degrees. So it's not as volatile yet, but it's at 27 degrees and it starts to leave Taurus next year. So we have this like weird transitionary period coming up where this is the last time that Uranus is just going to be hanging out in Taurus like this. So there's a lot I feel like that collectively we're purging, we're letting go of, and on an individual personal level, we're going to be moving on from things or preparing to move on from things because these are long-term transits. It's almost like we want it to end right now, but it can't because this is a very ongoing story and this is just part of the saga and it's not done just yet, but we need to start wrapping things up.
Yeah, I think that once Uranus gets to that 29th degree of Taurus, we'll feel that restlessness like really,
Oh
really strong.
yeah.
Even at 27, I think we're going to start to really see it. It's building to that really critical degree. And I think like the biggest maybe keyword or overarching theme on a collective level is that restlessness that it can
Yeah.
bring.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into the major astrological events that are happening. Speaking of restlessness.
Yeah.
And so, first and foremost, at the kind of middle to end of this month on January 20th, Pluto's moving back into Aquarius. And so, we had Pluto in Aquarius for just like a month last year. It didn't last very long at all. So, we got this like very small taste of what that could bring. And during that time, the one thing I think everyone noticed was that everyone was talking about AI and Chat GPT and all this, crazy stuff around that and how AI is going to take all of our jobs. And it just became like this frenzy. And so that's a good indicator of some of the themes that I think we could see coming back up this time around. But what are your thoughts on that?
For sure, definitely the AI. But also there, like the day, maybe it was the day after Pluto entered Aquarius, it was very soon. The TikTok owner guy was like on Capitol Hill being grilled, and there was a lot of talk about like banning TikTok. And so I think
Yeah.
like that tech, it was crazy how it lined up with the ingress. So, and like tech censorship and just government censorship in general. Also, the alien stuff started to be talked
Yeah.
about too. And that's like huge. And there was so much going on that people were like, oh, they're admitting that aliens are real and no one even cares because life is just so crazy. But they had those hearings on Capitol Hill as well. So those were really like Aquarian topics that came up very strongly into the forefront during Pluto and Aquarius and kind of have receded since it left. It was pretty
Yeah.
timely. Um, but I think
Except
those
for
things,
the alien at the Miami Mall last
oh, I
week.
know. I know.
That's totally real.
Definitely. Um, yeah, so like it's just those are the major things. But the other thing that I always kind of have noticed is that Pluto, whereas Saturn represents like known fears, like the
Mhm.
real tangible fears, because that's what
Mhm.
Saturn is. Pluto is very much connected to like the collective fears, the
Yeah.
collective like monster under the bed. So like while Pluto was in Capricorn, the collective boogeyman was like government and patriarchy and the deep state and the swamp and all of these things. And then with Pluto and moving into Aquarius, I think like that collective boogeyman is tech and AI
Oh
and
yeah.
surveillance. And, it's sort of like this, like what could happen You know what I mean? And that can be even more fearful. And also, when Pluto was in Aquarius, there was that open letter that was signed by a bunch of like tech people that said like AI needs to be slowed down, it's
Yeah.
scaring us. So, yeah, that sort of like our collective shadowy fears kind of take the form of the sign that Pluto's transiting. And when Pluto leaves that sign, like obviously, governments and corporate greed and all that doesn't go away when it leaves Capricorn, but kind of like puts a spotlight on those topics, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be a lot more talk about like the dangers and fears around AI, which I think are like well founded. But
Absolutely. Well, so Aquarius, for you guys who are not aware, has to do with technology. It's definitely the ruler of technology. Also space travel, which is, the
Mhm.
alien component there.
Right.
And Pluto, it's our collective fear and it's our collective will. And it's
Mm.
also a very penetrating, revelatory influence. And
Yeah.
so Pluto and Aquarius revealed to us the shadow side of the government, the
Mhm.
shadow side of, totalitarian types of control, the
Right.
shadow side of rules, regulations, restrictions, the shadow side of corporate hierarchies and the plutocracy, and all of these things were just in our faces. And so by the end of Pluto and Capricorn, we're kind of like, okay, we already know this is all going on.
Right.
What's
Right.
next, right? Like people are almost kind of getting bored with it. Like they need something new to kind of focus their attention and focus their energy on.
Right.
But that Pluto and Aquarius energy is going to be not just like fears around technology, but it's going to be an exposure of kind of like the shadowy underbelly of big tech, right? It could be also the exposure of the shadowy underbelly of, science, because
Right.
science is
Yes.
very much tied to Aquarius. And as
Mhm.
being someone who used to work in research, I know that there's a lot going on that most people don't realize that, it's already starting. Some people realize it. It's already
Hmm.
starting to come out, but I think that's going to become a bigger thing moving into Pluto and Aquarius too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, I think it's really interesting to look at. Obviously, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was a very long time ago, 1777 to 1798. But
Yeah.
we can, so I did a little research, and I'm sure people know this, but the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, kind of get an idea, the French Revolution, of course, the latter part of the American Revolution.
Yeah.
So, like themes of rebellion and overthrow, because Aquarius is the sign of the people. It's
Yeah.
people power, you know, fighting against repression, government control, like collectivism, the collective power of people.
Yeah.
So that I think, it's a revolutionary energy. Also, the Industrial Revolution started during Pluto and Aquarius and the creation of the cotton gin. So these sort of like innovative tech that changes the world. Those two things
Yeah.
changed the world, and like the overarching themes to me looking into it was like people creating things that are bigger than themselves, be whether they're actual physical, being innovative through like technologies that can help you, or movements that are bigger than them, that kind of take on different forms. Those themes of like um, bottom up power structures rather than top down,
Yeah.
big responses to government control and stuff like that. I could really see those things coming up again, or being more prominent.
Absolutely. Like decentralization, I think is going to
Yeah.
be like the keyword here. And when you think back to that time of like that 1777 period, that was just after the Declaration of Independence was signed. And it was just after Pluto just spent all that time in Capricorn. So that was like this laser focused energy, because that's Pluto. It's just
Yeah.
focusing really intensely on something, this laser focused energy or on the flaws of the current government structures of a specific government, a
Right.
couple of different governments. And, the result of that started to take hold more strongly with Pluto and Aquarius, with actually breaking things up and redistributing power. So it's kind of like the power is here. We need to break this. We need to transform it. We need to burn it down, because
Right.
that's that Pluto and Capricorn energy. And then Pluto and Aquarius is focusing on something completely different, which is that not just revolution, but decentralization. Because when you think about, America, for all of its flaws and all of its problems, like it was founded on this this principle of decentralization where we don't just have one like monarch that is just in
Yeah.
control of everything. Not only is there the ability to vote, but we're like a democratic republic and we have all of these different states with different laws. And it's less centralized than other governments were in that time period. And
And the
so
branches of government, like the levers
yes,
of
yes.
power to kind of like keep put a check, because these people were came from being ruled by a monarchy, so they knew. And that you're very, of course, looking at like Pluto's transit through Capricorn, showing them or really bringing to the surface the problems with this monarchy, with this top-down structure, and then with Pluto and Aquarius, kind of like um, the response to that, or solving that. And also, the Constitution was written and ratified while Pluto was in Aquarius.
Yes. Yes.
So then that theme of decentralization, giving power back to the people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's going to be a big keyword. We're going to see a lot more around that everywhere in the world.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so putting power back into the hands of the people, that's kind of a big theme. Technological advancements. The thing that I don't love that I think could be a thing that I've been talking about that people kind of get scary around is this idea of a technocracy. I think that's something that we're definitely moving toward. And I think that that's something that this Pluto and Aquarius transit could push us in that direction of, especially with all of the new advancements in technology. Um, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's another
No,
theme I was thinking about.
no, I wouldn't be surprised. I think it is scary, but I don't think that it's outside the realm of possibility. Hopefully, with some other transits that are happening, like even, that we'll talk about, maybe there could be some pushback against that. And even
Yeah.
Pluto in Aquarius, like at its best, is the power of humanity and the collective. And so hopefully, like if there are more power grabs by people in tech, and we see ourselves moving towards a technocracy, there can be people gathering together and having, protesting it or doing whatever you have to do, like not just falling into that, really resisting, because that Pluto in Aquarius at its best is resisting those structures of power, or people trying to exert undue authority over us, governments, because Pluto represents things that are more powerful than us: death, governments, institutions, stuff like that. Um, so yeah, hopefully that we can have a response to that. But I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, we have some time with it. I think like 20 years ish.
20
So
years, yeah.
a lot can happen in that amount of time. And with where we're at right now, I mean, it could get out of hand. So
There's gonna have to be some, I think, like guardrails again, because as soon as I just saw that Apple is, because another thing that I think is going to get really big is the VR, like those headsets,
mm,
um, immersive reality, like alternate realities, or immersing ourselves in an alternative reality. So like on February 2nd, Pluto moves into Aquarius on 20th of January, and then February 2nd, Apple's releasing like their new, it's not Oculus, but it's something similar. So that kind of like VR and immersive technologies that we can't even fathom right now. I just think it's going to
yeah.
happen quickly.
Yeah. It's like a doubling down on tech.
Yeah,
And things 20 years from now are going to look, I mean, we already know they're going to look nothing like they look right now, but like the level of advancement we're going to have between now and then is going to be mind blowing. Like it's going
yeah,
to be just like a whirlwind. Like everything's going to change so quickly. And if you don't adapt, if you don't keep up, like you're going to be super left behind during this time period. So it's like, do you want to engage with this, technology that could potentially have some nefarious components, or do you want to be left behind and not be involved in this? I think that's a choice that some people are actually going to be making as we get deeper and deeper into this transit too.
for sure, definitely. And I was thinking that, when Jupiter in Aquarius is trines Pluto in, I'm sorry, when Jupiter in Gemini trines Pluto in Aquarius, is when we could maybe start seeing this stuff come to the forefront or pop or be more prominent, like the quickness of
Yes.
the advancements. Because right out the gate, I think they're going to be feel very rapid.
Yeah.
But those trends, I think, will make it faster.
Absolutely. And the other thing too that you started to mention earlier is like the alien disclosure and the fact that Aquarius does rule like airspace and, I can't think of my brain right now what to call it, but like
Space travel?
interstellar, yeah, space
Oh,
travel and
yes,
like
yes,
interstellar travel. And so, I think we could see a lot of advancements in those fields, like on the human level, but also I think that could lead us to, making some important connections, or at the very least, making it so it's no longer plausible to deny the existence of maybe these other entities, or the existence of other beings that could
yeah,
be in our universe, because it's going to be so easy to access that information by the time Pluto's at the end of Aquarius, because of the advancements we'll make, because of the things that we can see and have access to out in the universe, that you won't be able to deny it anymore.
for sure. And I read somewhere that they're talking about, I don't know when, but definitely within this 20-year period of like leisure trips into space for rich people,
Yeah.
but taking them up and that being more of a thing that they're doing, not just Jeff Bezos. Um, yeah, like wanting to explore. Do you have $1 billion? Do you want to explore space? People kind of taking more trips. Maybe there will be more like exploration of the planets too, like rovers on Mars. And like I'm sure there will be
Yeah.
good and cool and innovative discoveries. But it's like the good, you have to take the good with the bad. And it's really just the unknown. We've never been here before.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so anything else about Pluto and Aquarius before we kind of move on to the next big theme?
No, no, I think we covered it.
Okay, cool. And we'll touch on this a little bit more as we move through the stuff that's going to be touching
Yeah.
Pluto and all of that and interacting. But the other thing I wanted to just mention briefly is that Chiron is going to be conjunct the North Node. So it's going to conjunct the True Node on February 19th at 16 degrees. And then it's going to come in and conjunct the Mean Node on March 5th, 2024 at 17 degrees. The reason I'm mentioning the Mean Node in addition to the true node, is that I have recently started using the mean node based on just direct experience and playing with some charts. I used to only teach the true node because
Mhm.
that's what I was taught and it seemed to work just fine. But with the true node, I noticed that events were just a little bit off. It was like within a range of a certain number of days it'll happen, right? And that was good enough for me. I was like, okay, I guess that's just how the nodes work.
Right.
But with the mean node, things are happening on the exact date that the mean node is being activated in some way. And so I do want to make note of the fact that this conjunction is happening with the true node on February 19th. It'll be very potent around that time, regardless of whether you use the true node or the mean node. But
Mhm.
March 5th for me is the more period that I have my eye on a little bit more, just because of that mean node connection. And at that time, too, we're going to have a Mars Uranus square at the start of March. So we have this Chiron conjunction to the North Node, a Mars Uranus square. The last time we had Mars interacting with Uranus was fall of 2023 during the eclipse season when, wars started breaking out. And
Yes.
so this is a weird energy and it's not going to feel good on a personal level because
Mhm.
it's Chiron. Chiron represents our deepest wounds, shame, vulnerabilities, insecurities. It's everything that just feels yucky that we want to push down and we don't want to deal with. But this forces us to look at it, to heal through something. This could bring like new developments or a new destination when it comes to like different healing modalities, especially the alternative health sphere.
Right.
And this could bring a lot of, healing on a personal level that could be experienced very positively. But with Chiron, on a collective level, it tends to bring up our collective wounds. And
Mhm.
so that's where things get a little bit dicey.
Okay. And what do you think? Because I don't work with Chiron as much as you, so I'm curious as to like what do you think could come up? Because I found that we experience transits more easily personally than like collectively, especially the hard
Yeah.
ones. Like, you can deal with a difficult transit on just in an easier, more flowing way generally than the collective one. So I wonder what you think that could bring up.
So what I've seen with Chiron so far in Aries as it's been transiting and being activated is that it brings up like these wounded energies in our society around a few different things that I don't want to dive into because this is going to be controversial, territory here. But just objectively speaking, this is what I see. It brings themes around race, LGBTQ rights, masculinity and femininity and, women's rights and things like that. For whatever reason, those are the things that seem to bubble up every time Chiron in Aries is activated. So I'm wondering what this will bring on that level. And then the eclipses are going to be activating this too shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and maybe like with Chiron and Aries, sort of like my my pain is the worst pain. Listen,
Yeah.
I'm the most whatever affected, damaged, afflicted, or I'm just the most important. Listen to me. Would kind of make sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And on an individual level too, there's going to be a
Sure.
lot of like, me, me, me. It's about me. Look at me. It's like the North Node, which is this obsessed, really like, growth promoting energy. And it's in the sign of Aries, which is the most self-focused. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it's very straightforward. I think
Yeah.
this could bring up a lot of, narcissism and attention seeking. And on social media, we'll see probably more of that than we already do around that time period. Not necessarily related to all of those themes I just mentioned, maybe, but
Mm.
on an individual like level, it's kind of like we're dealing with our wounds and our shame and our guilt by being like front and center and almost like I feel like there could be like a lot of denial of things where we're pushing forward and we're like, look at me, even though there's all this stuff going on beneath the surface.
Right, that we're not wanting to deal with or tackle.
Yeah.
Um,
Or it
Actually.
could be like what you said too, like, look at how bad my everything is, you know,
Yeah.
wanting to put that on display and wanting to, have that be a central focus too.
Okay. Yeah, and with that north node like amplifying, it's like a bullhorn or a magnifying glass, kind of really expanding on that. Yeah, I'm interested to see kind of how that plays out in my life, in my chart, but also like in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting. And the main reason I wanted to bring that up is because the next big energies are the eclipses. And so we have a penumbral lunar eclipse in Libra and then a total solar eclipse in Aries, which is going to be activating Chiron too. And so I can actually pull up the eclipse in Libra if we want to
Yeah.
look at that while we're chatting about it. Okay.
Yeah, these eclipses are big.
Can
They're
you see
important.
that?
Yes,
I can make it a little bigger. Oh, I don't know if it's bigger on your screen.
it is. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, cool. So this is the chart for the first eclipse of 2024, which
Mhm.
is going to be a relatively weak eclipse in the sign of Libra, but I think it's still going to pack a punch just because of the implications of this eclipse season. This is kind of like the carryover or the next phase in an ongoing story that really heated up in the fall of 2023. I mean, collectively on a global scale, things got wild. And on an individual level, a lot of people were just experiencing major changes, a lot of turbulence,
So
a
much
lot of
turbulence.
it's like everybody's lives were just completely
Rough.
upended when they
Yeah,
were being hit by these eclipses.
yeah. My clients, like everyone I talk to, is like, my husband found out about my affair. My boyfriend's been cheating. Like, I have to move all of a sudden. And I was, it was very overwhelming and chaotic for everyone. And of course, there was the beginning of a war, which is happened very close, to this first eclipse in Libra. And eclipses always tell a long term, like ongoing story for as long as the nodes are in those signs. And the actual eclipses are like inflection points in that story. So this eclipse, yeah, it's going to be a continuation of whatever storylines have been active for you,
Mhm.
in the areas of your chart that are represented by Aries and Libra, and whatever was came up for you in October, more can be revealed. Especially like I feel that, and just in practice, like lunar eclipses tend to be, sometimes they can, yes, bring us to some sort of culmination or ending, but oftentimes they're felt pretty like internally, and there can be um, recognitions, pivotal realizations, a change, a really important, significant change in perception, uh,
Yeah.
that is acts as a catalyst, in our larger story. I do like, let me make this a little bit bigger. I believe that this one is ruled by an exalted Venus, which is quite nice
Yeah. So it
because
is, but Venus is with Saturn and
I know.
Mars. So there's a co-presence between the ruler of this eclipse and Saturn and Mars.
Yeah.
Um, So, there's a mixed bag there.
Just, the April eclipse is worse. So I was like, oh, the
Yeah.
it's more it's a bit fraught. So yeah, no, I think that this Aries Libra, I mean, North Node in Aries on a collective level, what is Aries? It's like conflict, it's war.
Yes.
South Node, and the North Node expands and it amplifies, and the South Node is about um, release and letting go, why can't I think of the word? Things falling away, disillusion. Um, I said the wrong word, but either way, like moving away from. What is Libra? It's peace and it's balance and it's harmony and it's equilibrium. And so they're they've been a bit chaotic, these eclipses, and intense, and I think that they continue to be in 2024.
Absolutely. And this like Aries Libra axis, not only is Aries, as you mentioned, associated with like war and conflict, it's named for the god of war for a reason. But to me, this Aries Libra energy, it represents this me versus you or us versus them mentality where there's a need to strike a balance here, but nobody's at this point willing to do that.
Mm,
And so we've seen that in the collective hugely like after those eclipses that happened in the fall of 2023, and I think that's going to expand, but on an individual level too with my clients and with my students and my friends and family, I was seeing that energy play out as well. It's kind of like, well, me versus this person. I'm doing it this way, they're doing it that way, it just can't work. My way is the right way.
yeah,
North
no,
Node in Aries.
for sure. And like no desire, or a very little, the desire for your um to do what you want to do outweighs the desire to find a middle ground or balance or harmony or some kind of equilibrium.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean
which
it's not there, but it can be like the overarching theme is like, what's in it for me? You know, which can be good. Like that net, some people, some of us need to become more necessarily selfish, but it can be overdone as
Well,
the note.
and this eclipse to me, because the moon is in the sign of Libra, it's a full moon eclipse. It is very revelatory, as you mentioned. This is kind of like all of a sudden getting an aha moment or seeing something from a different perspective or somebody else's perspective, and maybe finding a way to strike a better balance because of that, which could lead to, very fated, very life-changing events, situations, things of that nature. But it's that like revelatory energy where it's all of a sudden like, oh my God, I didn't think that this person would feel this way, but now I understand. Or I didn't think that that opinion could be correct or that information could be valid. But now I'm seeing it from that perspective and I understand where the truth is here.
Yeah. Yeah, like the clouds parting. Eclipses can really bring these changes in perception, which sounds sort of like, okay, you're seeing things differently, but they can be life-changing.
Yeah.
Like you're like after a movie, you're seeing your eyes have to adjust to the light, and it's sort of like everything looks different. And that's how eclipses can be sometimes, especially the lunar eclipses.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else about this eclipse before we get to the juicy one?
No.
All right. So we
Oh,
have, I'm sharing it.
okay.
Yeah, there we go. So we have the total solar eclipse happening on April 8th of 2024. This is the second total eclipse that's going to be visible throughout the entire United States of America, or not the entire United States, but it's going right across the entire United States of America, and it's going to be visible in its totality here. The first one led to a lot of global conflict that the United States is very much involved in.
Mm,
Unfortunately, and I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, I don't see this being any different. I think that this is going to be an escalation of those things.
mhm,
And if you were going through a lot of change and a lot of turbulence during that eclipse period on a personal level, this is going to be the next phase of that. It's kind of like something from that last eclipse season is coming back around, and it's almost like you have a big cosmic reset where something new needs to happen as a result of that.
yeah, but there could be a lot of resistance, either personally or resistance to your plans, because in during this eclipse we have a Saturn Mars conjunction, and Mars is the
Yeah.
ruler of the eclipse. And also, just before we talk about that, I just think it's so significant that we have a total solar eclipse, which is the strongest eclipse, it's closest to the Earth. It's visible from Maine to Texas, like the whole, like kind of crisscrosses America, and it's in an election year. just
Yeah,
a lot of indications of like this eclipse cycle being a really important turning point in like American history, in world events. It's very um, it's significant. And I think it's going to be
absolutely.
felt more difficultly because it's ruled by that. And this is, I believe, Mars's first conjunction with Saturn while it's been in Pisces. So it's like a new Mars Saturn cycle. I think I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so, I mean, as you're saying that, I like get chills because I feel the exact same way. Like something about this is so significant and it's going to alter the destiny of the United States of America in a really profound way. I've heard all sorts of different theories, like we're going to be divided very literally into different sectors or
for one.
factions. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm having trouble with language today. But we're going to be divided very literally into like these different sectors,
yeah.
or very literally, actually, the splitting apart of the United States to like just civil war or infighting amongst Americans, like all sorts of different things. I don't know that it's going to be to that level, but it
Mm,
is going to be something that changes the way the United States is from here on out, and the way that the government probably is from here on out too.
for sure. I've also heard, people say that maybe a presidential contender will drop out. I think there could be like a shakeup,
Oh,
to
definitely a shakeup.
well, a big shakeup. Mercury will be retrograde as well, just because let's make it more confusing and all over the place. Um, so it's a really interesting time, and it's fraught. It's tense, and even in your personal life too. Solar eclipses are about like being catapulted in a new direction, and that can definitely happen for us in that Aries ruled area of our chart. If you have any planets around 19 Aries, but this eclipse being ruled by Mars in a very close conjunction to Saturn, there's resistance, there's stress, there's tension. Things are not happening easily, and eclipses often bring sort of like really um, changes to our plans, in ways that we weren't expecting. Major like course altering events come up, and
Mm.
that could be another major theme, and then could feel disruptive. Um, I think it's an interesting one. I don't want to make it seem all bad, but it is. I mean, eclipses are
I'm trying to find
inherently,
something good to talk about, but like
yeah.
I don't like this eclipse. I don't. I mean,
No.
it's in an exact conjunction with Chiron, like exact,
Mhm.
exact. And all of those themes I talked about on a societal level that have been coming up time and time and time again
Yeah.
and kind of rattling things, those themes I think are going to come back up right around this time. So I think there could be protests. I think there could be a public outcry about something. I think that, that could be part of it. And obviously, that war energy is there too. On a personal level, if there's stuff that you haven't been dealing with, that you've been pushing and bearing beneath the surface, and you have really strong cardinal energy, especially around that 19th degree. So, Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, for those who don't know that, this is going to be a time where you have to deal with those things. You have to deal with the guilt. You have to deal with the shame. You have to deal with whatever traumatic experience you're maybe pushing away and not wanting to think about or heal through. You're going to have to deal with your own stuff, and it's not going to be an option to not do that. Like, this is not an optional healing process for people who have a lot of this cardinal energy. And so it's going to feel a little icky for some people, but this could also be an energy. This is where I think it could be positive for some people. This could be an energy of profound healing, or coming into your own as a healer, or big developments, again, in the healing professions, especially those alternative healing modalities. If
Yeah.
you're somebody that's in that realm, this could be big. This could be huge for you. If you're somebody that's seeking help in this realm, this could be big. This could be huge for you. So there's a lot of potential for progress and for healing, but it doesn't feel like this is going to be light and fluffy to get there.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really being faced, like you mentioned before, like if there's been anything that a person has been sweeping under the rug, not wanting to deal with. The Saturn's influence here is sort of like your slaps in the face with reality, but sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need to be really confronted with our issues, what has been plaguing us, because in before we get there, we if we don't acknowledge, then we can't take any steps to remedy, but this could be the jumping off point, even if it's like a harsh reminder or a harsh realization. It can be a jumping off point into maybe, doing some sort of like holistic healing or starting your own business, or, taking that leap that feels scary that you haven't
Yeah.
been wanting to do, but it's like now or never sort of energy.
I think a lot of people are going to be starting fresh with all sorts of different things at this time.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a fresh start and a clean break, like this is the year for it. First off, with all of that 29-degree energy, this is the year to leave behind anything toxic, to leave behind anything confusing, nebulous, to leave behind bad habits, and to start something fresh and to do it, to go all in on something. Like this this is an eclipse, a new moon in the sign of Aries. This is an all in, passionate, super willful, super excited energy. And so, on the flip side of all of this, like it's almost as if there's like some sort of difficulty that stimulates this fresh start or this energy of going all in on something. And I
Mhm.
think that could actually be pretty positive as well.
Yeah.
Although that
Yeah.
Saturn Mars means don't do it right. Like, don't just, you know.
Yeah, don't jump in and without any plans, or like impulsively, like how Aries likes to
Yes.
do it sometimes, plan and plot, and strategize.
But there's the seed of something here for
Yeah.
sure. And as the eclipses become activated time and time again, all of those eclipse activation periods after this,
Mm,
after those start to take hold and pass, things are going to start to progress, and you're going to start to see whatever it is that you're going all in on actually, do like turn into something real for you.
yeah.
But it might be a little slow at the beginning, or it might be, I don't know. I feel like this could just happen all at once for some people. There's
It
some
depends
there's
on how
some
it's hitting.
challenge here, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're right. I think it depends on how it's hitting somebody's chart.
Yeah, definitely. If you have a heavy influence in the mutable signs with that Saturn Mars,
Mm,
then there's going to be more blockages. There's going to be more hesitation. There's going to be more challenge to actually getting things off the ground. But if you have more of this cardinal energy, especially if you have a lot of Aries energy, like this could be just like boom. Or if you have fire sign energy that's not in Aries, this could
yeah,
be
fire sign for
trying.
sure.
Yeah. So if you have a lot of Leo, if you have a lot of Sagittarius, this could actually work in your favor really nicely. And you probably won't have, especially that Leo, because there's not that square from Saturn and Mars. So if
Yeah,
you have like a lot of Leo, this could be major. This could be really, really important.
yeah. Big
But
stuff.
yeah. Is there anything else with this one before we jump into the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, which I think is a happier topic?
Yeah, definitely. I'm ready for that. I think we did well on that. Yeah, I think the Jupiter Uranus conjunction is like, it's a bright spot in the year, and I like also that we're kind of building to it, and for the first half of the year until the end of April. So there's that sort of like applying um, energy of anticipation, like that, applying conjunction.
Yeah.
It's a nice, exciting energy. So I think it is like a bright spot, and it kind of colors the year in a nice way.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like an energy of just unexpected, unanticipated, just very bizarre new opportunities that you never could have guessed at, you never could have anticipated, you never would have dreamed to be possible before. And I love, love, love this energy. On a collective level, too, I think this could be an expansion of a lot of really powerful new opportunities. I think we'll see a big boom in all sorts of different technology.
Mhm.
This could actually be a positive thing for some of the stuff that I've been talking about since before Uranus even went into Taurus, which is the food supply
Oh,
and this like these technological advancements in food production that, are sometimes a little nefarious. I
yeah.
I think that this could be a development that could be along those lines, but it's actually positive. Or one of the things I've been saying about Uranus and Taurus that I think this could be centered more around too is like these breakaway like factions of people that are, which it's been happening since Uranus went into Taurus, that are wanting to like have small farms, do regenerative
Mm,
agriculture.
yeah.
They're wanting to grow their own. They're wanting to do things differently. So their response to the disruption in the food supply and all of these other issues that are at hand here is to do it their own way or to do it smaller, to decentralize the food supply, which is Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So
Yeah.
my hope is that that goes in that direction as opposed to more like creepy lab grown meats, but I don't know.
Finding bugs and stuff. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think because of Jupiter's like benevolent influence, I think that the innovations in food and hopefully housing, things like that, that Taurus represents, maybe the financial sector, I think they'll be better. Something I found that I thought was really interesting related to innovative foods was there was a Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus in the 40s, and it was happening in 1941. And in 1941, M&Ms were created, and they were created to for like soldiers at war to
Oh,
be
really?
chocolate that didn't melt. So it was like an innovative food product that was created to like, send to the boys, in World War II. So I thought that was like cute and cool, and I'm like, okay, that was like a really helpful, innovative food product. So along the lines of what you're saying, like less nefarious, not like wanting us to eat bugs and eat meat grown in a lab, more maybe sustainable farming
Yeah.
or, making making healthy food less, more affordable for more people, stuff like that. I don't know, but I think it could have like a nice influence on the food industry, even if it's just a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that could be the same. So that's kind of what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I think we will probably see some stuff around like food technology and things like that around that time that I might not agree with, but somebody might think it's positive.
Right.
But yeah, for the most part, I think this is really, really good. The other thing too that again, I'm sure you've been aware of, and I've been talking about since before, like I think like 2016 is when I first started talking about this, is with Uranus moving into Taurus. I was saying that there's going to be a bigger energy around cryptocurrency, more widespread adoption, and a lot of volatility in the crypto markets. And we've seen that, of course.
Oh, yeah.
This is something with that. I think there's going to be some sort of growth or expansion or something coming. I'm not a crypto person. I don't really understand these things very well, but I
Yeah,
know what I see in the astrology, and this has to do with something going on, a change in the financial markets potentially. And absolutely, this could be some sort of big change involving cryptocurrency because that's digital, Uranus, and currency, which is Taurus. Taurus is money, possession.
100%. That is spot. I could definitely see that happening for sure. And we've seen it, as you mentioned, with Uranus transiting Taurus for the last
Yeah.
years.
I think this is like more of a positive thing though. So it
Right.
could almost be like it's like the opposite of having some sort of government rules, regulations, or restrictions being placed on cryptocurrency. It's almost as if something could be passed that allows it to be exchanged more freely or makes it easier for people, or new technology could come in that
Mm.
makes it more usable for people or makes it easier for people
Easier.
that are not as tech savvy to adopt and to understand.
Yeah,
And that could obviously help to grow and accelerate like the cryptocurrency markets too. So there's a lot that could go on here.
for sure. Definitely. I think also something good or some good ways that this could show up is Taurus rules like art, and it's a Venus ruled sign, so art, music, culture. There could be like some um, new music genres or styles that come out, or expansion. Some really, again, it doesn't. This isn't going to affect our world in like a huge way, but yeah, like new good music or um, yeah, like really innovative art and things like that. I think could just maybe come onto the scene a little bit more, which is nice, and it benefits people's lives.
Yeah, and this is sort of happening in the background of these eclipses too. Like even though it comes exact on April 20th, it's already happening in the background of everything right now.
Yeah.
So it's starting to build. And so we should be starting to see some of these themes start to pop up, especially as we get into, February, March, but especially in April, this is going to be peaking. So it's kind of like we have this crazy chaos going on in the background with the eclipses where things don't feel as nice. But then we
Mm.
have this opportunity that comes up, and it's like, where did this come from? How did this happen? What even is this?
Right.
But you're so glad for it.
Definitely. And it's really a blessing. Like, there is that chaos, and then there's, maybe there's some new really great music you're listening to, or there's like a new artist that you really love. But also in your life, especially in the area of your chart that is ruled by Taurus, the topics related to that
Mhm.
house, new, surprising, sudden, potentially disruptive, like, but opportunities for expansion, for growth, for greater freedom. And you can really, on a personal level, be feeling this desire. Like, if you feel repressed in that
Mhm.
area at all, you'll feel much more rebellious, much more open or apt to take like calculated risks, I think, and even be blessed with the heightened awareness, that energy of like downloads, breakthroughs,
Mhm.
breakups, breakdowns, like, oh, aha, this is what I need to do. This is how I'm going to play it. So it's really helpful to have this playing in the background of a otherwise kind of chaotic time period. It's and it adds some excitement too for everyone. It's like, what's going to happen? Uranus it's an inherently unpredictable planet. So
Yeah.
we know the topics and the themes for sure, but it's sort of like, I don't know.
The one thing I've noticed with Uranus, it's always the thing you think it won't be. Like you don't think it will be. So you
Yeah.
think it's going to be this thing. You're like, it's definitely going to be this thing. And then it's just completely something different. Every
Yeah.
single time Uranus hits my chart, this happens to me. I'm like, I'm an astrologer. I know that this is going to be what happens. And then it's like the weirdest thing that makes perfect sense astrologically, but I never could
Right.
have thought of that. Like
Yeah.
that wasn't even in my consciousness. It was so outside of my paradigm. So we're going to have a lot of that. It's like really surprising, very disruptive, but good. It's like, whoa.
Right. Like,
That
I
was
was not
strange, but it's
expecting that.
great.
And I think that we'll also see, and this is a major theme of 2024, just with a lot of transits, is like rapid advancements in
Yeah, yeah.
and all of these, like, potentially food and culture and maybe music and stuff like that, but like rapid advancements. I was looking back, and like during a Jupiter Uranus conjunction, I don't think it was in Taurus. The first animal was cloned, like, first time ever they cloned like a sheep in Scotland, which was very big
Yeah, I saw
technological.
that too.
Yeah, in like 97. And then in 2010, there was a Jupiter Uranus conjunction. That's when the iPad was released. The
Yeah.
iPhone became like the most used thing in the world, like phone, I guess, in the world. And also, robotic legs were created, or made better, more like easy to use. So these like technological advancements, definitely, I think we'll see for sure, that hopefully are like, that really make people's lives better. Not this kind of, who knows, with Pluto and Aquarius, there's a lot of ways that it can go. But because of Jupiter's influence, it's like, oh, maybe there'll be like a cure for something, or um, just something created or improved upon Taurus that
Mhm.
can really help a group of people that are suffering from some kind of affliction.
Definitely. And this Uranus Jupiter energy, it's not going to be something that restricts people because Jupiter and Uranus together, that's freedom.
Oh
So
yeah.
people are going to be craving freedom. The opportunities that come up are going to bring freedom. You're going to hear a lot, a lot of people talking about freedom, right? Like that. I think that's going to be a big keyword: freedom, sovereignty, innovation, like all of those
Yeah.
will be buzzwords during this time. And this in our own personal lives, it's going to be looking at like where we've let things get really monotonous, really dull, really stale, really stagnant, and where we need to shake things up and where maybe we need more freedom. So I think collectively that might be a theme, but especially on an individual level, wherever this is falling in your chart, you guys, like think about where you could use a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more freedom, a big change of some kind to shake you out of anything that just feels stuck.
Yes. And speaking of freedom and like ultimate sort of like pervasive, like everybody's talking about freedom and autonomy. In 1968, we had a Jupiter Uranus
Yeah,
conjunction.
yeah. It was like in the late 60s.
Yeah, and that was the time. Like, I think Woodstock was 69, but like the late 60s were um, really a popular cultural revolution, all focused on freedom and autonomy and music and art and expression and expansion.
And I mean, it's not just when this happens, like on the day,
Right.
it's really this is like a period of time. The
Mm,
entire time that Jupiter and Uranus are together in the sign of Taurus, that's the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. And even shortly after Jupiter leaves, it's still going to be in orb, like out of sign too. So
mm.
this energy, these themes are probably already here. And sometimes we don't even recognize them until like we look at it in retrospect and we're like, wow, that was crazy. Um, And I'm sure during that time people knew something big was happening, but looking back on it, in respect to the remainder of their lives, it's like, wow, that was actually huge what was going on there. That was really innovative. That was really wild. There was such an emphasis on these themes.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything else about Jupiter and Uranus we should touch on before we?
Just one thing that I found that I thought was interesting.
Okay.
At some point, I didn't write the date down, but during the American and French revolutions, when they intersected, there was a Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus, and Pluto was in Aquarius, which I just find interesting because we're like that's a parallel to major planetary transits that were happening then during these like revolutions,
Yeah,
and now.
that makes perfect sense.
It does, right? Doesn't it make so much sense? Um, but again, I'm not saying that we're going to overthrow the government or anything, but this really, and even that
Maybe.
1968,
Don't rule it out. No, just kidding.
I don't know how much I can say on YouTube, but
Don't
yeah, no,
take me off of YouTube.
yeah. But there's really this like groundswell of energy, and um, we see it come up. So especially just like this French and American revolutions, this like taking back control, power to the people. We don't want to listen to you anymore. And even the 1968 energy,
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see. It's two really significant things that were happening then that all transits that were occurring then that are also occurring now.
Well, what was going on then too was like a major war, like the war in
Yes.
Vietnam. And so we
Yeah.
have two big wars going on that the United States are very much involved in.
Yeah.
And between those energies and what's going on here, I could see, protests. I could see like a lot of stuff coming up around that too.
Yeah, definitely. For sure.
All right, so let's get out of this. So I don't have a chart for the next one, but Jupiter is moving into Gemini on
Mhm.
May 25th of 2024, and it is going to very quickly trine Pluto, but then it's going to square Saturn. And so Jupiter in Gemini, to me, is an expansion of obviously communication. Gemini's communication.
Mhm.
Jupiter is expansive. It creates more freedom. It creates more openness. And Jupiter trine Pluto is the expansion of truthful communication.
Mhm.
I think that's going to be a huge theme around the time Jupiter moves into Gemini, just for a short while, because then Jupiter is going to square Saturn. So in my brain, when I saw this, I was like, truthful communication, and then restrictions. So what does that look like? Probably censorship, right? Probably some sort of either tech censorship or government censorship or some sort of push to shut whatever the heck this is down, because this looks like it could be like a big exposure of something that's really positive for the collective. But, for some reason, just gets stopped.
Wow, that's a really interesting read on that. That makes a lot of sense. Because I was thinking when Jupiter, well, firstly, when Jupiter immediately enters Gemini, immediately trines Pluto, it's a huge deal. And I think that it can
Yeah.
definitely like dramatically expand on whatever Pluto in Aquarius has been trying to do. And Pluto can give Jupiter help too, because trine is when two planets are on the same team. They're kind of like in constant contact and they're helping each other out. So it can be good for both planets. And I think it can bring some of these Pluto and Aquarius topics to the forefront. It's very
Yeah.
0 degree, at that 0 degrees. And then when Jupiter, and we're going to really feel, I think, this shift because Jupiter goes from being in a sign-based sextile to Saturn
Mm.
in when it was from Taurus to Pisces, which is cooperative. It's not like the most prominent, but it's cooperative that they're working together. They're not working at cross purposes. Then it goes into it's a square. I was thinking that it could also be what's been growing in our lives in those, and also external, like collectively meets resistance, gets a
Mhm.
reality check, gets sort of like, and this can be good. I was thinking like necessary hard stops for maybe AI, or like if things have been moving so fast, in the tech sector, but also in our personal lives, there can definitely be sort of like a needing to regroup, or coming up against resistance where there had been a lot of like momentum, and it's like, oh no, I really have to kind of rethink and reimagine what I'm doing, or what I'm doing this for. But what, as you mentioned, sort of feeling resistance governmentally or from the powers that be, would make sense too. So I think that we can see this play out in all of these things can play out.
Yeah, at the same time, and they
Yeah,
might not be, mutually exclusive, and they might be combined in some way. So,
yeah, yeah. The
yeah,
energy of Jupiter into Gemini is definitely so much different, of course, than Jupiter in Taurus. Gemini is much more like, it's witty and it's playful and it's quick and frenetic and much more chaotic
yes.
than Taurus. So Jupiter is really going to be taking off. It's a big change in the energy, because Jupiter and Taurus is, I liked it because it helped us grow and to create, more solid structures and foundations, hopefully, and more sustainability in our lives. Jupiter and Gemini is just like wants to go, wants to move. And then when it squares Saturn, it's like that need for expansion comes into conflict with the need to kind of let go of some stuff, to constrict, or someone or something steps in our way and says, no, you can't expand anymore. You have to like do this, that, and that. There's bureaucracy and red tape and difficulty, or some hurdles that we have to go through.
Yeah. And it's interesting in that we're going from this expansion, like you mentioned, of the material plane to
Hmm.
this expansion of the mental plane.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a bigger focus on that type of outlet, that type of energy, and in our own lives too. Like this is a very cerebral type of influence. And Jupiter, it's technically at its detriment in the sign of Gemini, but it tends to do all right. Like it's not as bad as Jupiter in Virgo, where it's also in its detriment. I've noticed that Jupiter and Gemini already, like just because I have it in my own chart, and I'm like, this is
Mm.
actually fine. I don't know what you guys are talking about in its detriment. But when I
Yeah.
started learning like Hellenistic astrology, I was like, oh, Jupiter is one of the triplicity lords of
Yeah.
Gemini. And I have it at the beginning. So it's, in the Jupiter term and it's in the Jupiter decan. And, so of course it's going to function really well. So,
Right.
Jupiter and Gemini isn't the worst thing. It's not that Jupiter's completely unsupported like it would be in some other sign, like again in Virgo. It
Mm.
does have some support. And so this is where that expansion can actually happen. So we can have an expansion of new ideas,
Yeah.
new ways of viewing things, new ways of communicating with people. This could be like a new form of social media that comes up that is,
That's what I thought too.
yeah, very
Yeah.
interconnected. But then Saturn comes in. It's like
Right.
they don't want us to have it.
It really could be. And you know what else? Maybe it could be like, because Jupiter and Gemini, people are wanting to learn, they're wanting to read, they're wanting to like take in more knowledge. Um, so I was thinking maybe Substack, or like a new form of Substack, or like people
Mm.
sort of like not applying, subscribing to like newsletters, or people sort of like speaking truth to power, maybe even with that Jupiter trine Pluto. It's like they're getting more followers and more engagement, or maybe like an influx of people that create Substacks, or any kind of like message boards, anywhere where you're writing your thoughts down and kind of sending them out to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe even like an open sourcing of certain information or certain, it could be something like that as well.
Yeah, or there could be like a WikiLeaks kind of thing that happens too.
Yeah, an information leak.
Yeah,
That
where
would be very
someone,
Jupiter trine Pluto.
it would, right? And someone, like being like the people need to know this kind of thing.
Hmm. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I like this energy, especially at the beginning. Jupiter square Saturn, it's like it is restricting the growth in that area to a certain extent, but it's almost as if it's also refining it. It's kind of like you can't just
For
expand
sure.
all over the place and do whatever the heck you want. On a personal level, it could be that we go all in, we start to do all these things, we take advantage of too many opportunities. And
Hmm.
then summer comes in, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, I can't do all this.
Right. Yeah, no,
Reality sets in.
reality sets in, and I think sometimes we need a reality check where it's like, okay, let me kind of get my stuff together, cross my T's, dot my I's, see what is possible, what is doable, and what is just too much. We can't have just like sustained growth without periods of sometimes we have to hit a wall, and that's what that sat and that conjures up a difficult image, but just sort of like look at the reality of the situation and decide what can be done and what we don't have time for or aren't doing the right way and needs to like be shifted. That's it.
Yeah. So nothing to be too scared of,
Yeah, yeah,
especially because Jupiter's in the mix.
right. We love Jupiter.
All right. So speaking of Saturn, we
Yes.
have what I am calling the almost conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn, or Saturn and Neptune, which is
Mhm.
happening in June and July. So basically what's happening here, you guys, is that this is the first time that Saturn and Neptune are within like an actual just close orb of being in a conjunction. They won't actually come into a conjunction until February of 2026. And that's actually going to happen at 1 degree in the sign of Aries, which is going to be a completely different feeling. But in terms of the closeness in Pisces, this is the first time where they're together in the same sign and they're starting to just start to meet each other. And Saturn's actually going to be stationing at this time, and Neptune's going to be stationing at this time. So they're just sitting there in close proximity for pretty much all of June and July. And
Mhm.
so this co-presence is going to be felt in a big way. And so we have the Saturn station to go retrograde on June 29th at 19 degrees Pisces, and Neptune stations to go retrograde on July 2nd at 29 degrees Pisces. And this is going to bring up all sorts of things. I want to hear your opinion on this first, though.
Okay, so yeah, no, I think it is, and it's really interesting because so Saturn is facts, figures, boundaries, the known, coming up, to meet with Neptune, which is literally the opposite of that. It's dreams, illusions, fantasy. It's nebulous and foggy. Um, it's Saturn is like solid ground to stand on, and Neptune represents like is no ground to stand on.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to bring up a lot of this sort of need to separate truth from fantasy, but having it be really difficult. What's real and what's fake can become much harder to discern or to understand.
Mhm.
Energy of polarization, information bubbles, um, and also just sort of these questions. I think it brings up the Saturn Neptune, a real feeling of like the sense of a sense of like the world that we know it is not. It's crumbling. It's falling away. Very much so, but also who gets to define reality, what gets to define reality. That can also be like a question that comes up personally as well as collectively. So in my research I like read that during the Saturn Neptune square, speaking of polarization, that's when we elected Donald Trump, which was a very polarizing figure, and I think he was elected because we were so polarized. But that's another thing. Fake news, the term fake news was coined. I was listening to
Yeah.
the astrology podcast and Chris Brennan said that, and I was like, oh my god, it's like the perfect description of Saturn Neptune alignments, fake news. Um, yeah, Pokemon Go was big in 2016, which is kind of like
Oh,
the merge,
yeah.
the real and the fake. What's real and what's fake. People were like running into cars and stuff. So yeah, this like real need to discern what is true and what is false, but a really difficult time getting there. And hopefully there can be some like a Saturnian response to this, where it's like more skepticism and more verification and fact checking, although there's problems with that too. But just sort of um, a desire or feeling compelled to be more skeptical and to not believe everything that we read. But I think it'll take us a few years, I don't know, a while to like get to there. I think everything gets way more confusing if it's possible.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you bring up 2016 because I hesitate to say this now because of this connection that's so glaringly obvious.
Mm,
But the other thing that Saturn Neptune tends to bring is this savior complex, the savior mentality, where
uh,
people escape from their responsibility for something by just putting it on some entity, some savior. Somebody's going to save me. So it's kind of like, I don't have to deal with the real world. I don't have to deal with this responsibility because the government's going to save me. This cult leader is going to save me. This
right.
public figure is going to save me. They're going to erase all of my student loans and I will never have to pay them back. And, this next president's going to save everything. And this
Drain
person
the
is going to
swamp.
do it all for me. Yeah. So, like, it's interesting that that was happening in 2016. Sorry, my dog is like coughing next to me.
Okay.
um, But it's interesting that was happening in 2016 because I do think that was part of that energy. But even right now, the thing that I've been seeing, and I talked about before Saturn moved into Saturn moved into Pisces, was this energy around cults because of that savior complex and that savior mentality. I was like, I looked at the history, and during these Saturn and Pisces and Saturn Neptune periods, there's always this like influx of cult activity, especially with Saturn and Neptune.
So,
And so, what we've seen in the past like year is all of these documentaries about all of these different cults and all of these different online cults that are maybe cults and maybe not cults. The lines are very blurred. It's very
yeah,
Neptunian. It's like, is this Twin Flames group a cult or is it just an online group? Is Teal Swan a cult leader or is this just like an online group that's being led by an influencer? Because nobody's there in person anymore. It's
right.
very easy to actually run a cult from your living room and have people that are just all over the world that are members. It's not the way that it was with the Branch Davidians and other cults where they were in a compound and everybody was in one place and they were separated from the other people in their lives and from normal society very intentionally. It's almost as if some of these people are doing the same thing or achieving the same ends without having to have that physical proximity anymore, through like mental manipulation alone. And some of these aren't even cults either. So like it's very blurred. I've seen like 20 documentaries about cults that have been just floating around right now.
I've
Um
seen all the ones that you mentioned, and you're right, they are a little I'm really into cults. So I just find them fascinating. But you're right, kind of the more modern cults, they're different than,
yeah.
just as you said, than the cults of yore. Um, and yeah, so do you think that there's going to be like a even more maybe like cults that come up onto the scene, and even I guess like Neptune Saturn as well? It's sort of like doing things differently, not the old, I don't Manson and David Koresh. We're the new school, kind of like intentionally even like moving away from the way that those kinds of things were have been done.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be more around that. I think there could even be some sort of event sometime in the next year or so that centers around cults that's going to be newsworthy. And I think based on what I've seen so far, it could be like some sort of nebulous, like online situation where it's like, is this a cult? Where is the line? And then all of a sudden something really crazy happens and it's like, oh, that's the line.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That makes sense. You know what else I found, with like Saturn, Neptune? A lot of Saturn, the 24-hour news cycle and like the creation of the 24-hour news cycle very much lines up with like the Saturn, Neptune alignments. I believe CNN was created during a Saturn, Neptune alignment. I think it was in opposition. Sky News, which is like the UK's first 24-hour news channel, was created during a Saturn, Neptune connection. And so like that energy of like what is real, whose reality
Mhm.
am I living in, who gets to define reality, um it maybe will be like revisited. And I think also like the fake news, like alternative facts, every person armed with their own set of facts, where it's like, how can we find the middle? We can't find common ground here. So that's just becoming more amplified, especially in a year where there's an election too. And
Yeah.
they're getting very close. Saturn, Neptune in Pisces, it just seems wild.
I think that that will make things interesting, definitely. Um, but yeah, like this isn't all bad either. It's interesting. It's going to make things strange,
Yeah.
especially out there in the world. But on a personal level, I mean, this is a really great time to get into some sort of like really deep spiritual discipline, to get in touch with your own spirituality in a very tangible, more concrete fashion. This would be a really great time to, study something really intensively around spirituality, around, esoteric types of teachings and principles. So you could do
Yeah.
that and do that really well. It's where you draw the line though. It's like Saturn wants you to do things for yourself. Saturn wants you to be responsible. It's about accountability and self-responsibility. If you're keeping that while you're diving into these things, you're not going to go and join a cult. If you're not keeping that while you dive into these things, then maybe you will. The same thing can be said for anything while Saturn's in Pisces. Like you have to just remain accountable because it's going to be very hard to do that because you're going to be, um, your boundaries are going to be not just tested, but like dissolved. And
Mm,
so It's going to be harder to be self-disciplined. It's going to be harder to, discern what's real and what's not real. And it's going to be harder to make yourself accountable for your actions with Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And I think it's already been that way for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think that a positive way of utilizing this energy is like really sort of strengthening your center of gravity. You know, what is real? What is important to me? What do I have to do? What are my boundaries? Are they, um, solid enough? Do I have to rethink them? Like checking in with what um, your responsibilities and commitments are, and if you're living up to them. And while you do, with Saturn and Pisces, because it is a strange sort of um, energy of Saturn and Pisces. I found it to be quite heavy and kind of deep but sad. It's really can feel really heavy. Your responsibilities can feel really heavy. They can feel overwhelming, but finding that balance is important. And even like with this Neptune influence, getting um, losing yourself, but not completely, but in meditation, journal, any of these alternative sort of healing modalities, or trying something new, going to Reiki or yoga, or doing some like hypnotherapy, like these things can help, to create that balance between the responsibilities and your responsibilities, your real world, and positive forms of escapism and spirituality and connectedness in those ways. But you got to
Yeah.
have the balance
Yeah.
because then it can get a little bit weird if you don't. Um, the other thing is like Neptune ruling art and images and video. I was thinking there could be maybe more like deep fakes or the AI like
Yeah.
imagery and things like that, and like harder to discern. Is this video real? Is it not real? Is this
Ooh.
really that person? And it
Maybe
came
a
up
deep
awareness.
fake that like tricks everyone and like it
Yeah,
just turns into something really chaotic.
I was thinking that when you said like some sort of event. I know that like you were mentioning cults, but any kind of like, because I think it's going to take us a little bit to catch up with the rapid advancement of all of, especially with the imagery. Like, do you remember when um people were doing that? Just the AI art is getting, and the AI like pictures and images are getting really good, and
Yeah.
they're just going to get better. So, yeah, really having to confront that, and yeah, I think it will be the process.
Definitely. Definitely. Is there anything else we need to touch on before we get into the first eclipse in Pisces?
Um, no, I think that we covered it.
Okay, so let me pull that up. I think this is it. All right, so we have speaking of Pisces. We have a partial lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces, which is activating this Saturn Neptune energy because it's sitting kind of right in between it. And so this
Yeah,
is happening on September 17th. The obvious takeaway could be that a lot of the themes we just talked about are going to be like revealed, brought into the forefront, illuminated in some way. And
right.
so that's definitely going to be a part of it. But the other thing is that this is the first eclipse that's going to be in a series of eclipses that will happen in the sign of Pisces and Virgo. They won't really start being fully into Pisces and Virgo until 2025 because the nodes are still in Aries and in Libra. So this is kind of like a transcending of those two lines. But the first eclipse in any sign, when it's like shifting into a new sign, even before the nodes shift, is usually a sneak preview. It's usually not as big with actual events occurring, but it's usually a preview of what's to come with the topics, themes, signs, synchronicities, communications, etc., that come in around that time that seem and are just that seem significant, but are just like obviously significant sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a preview. I was calling it like a preview eclipse of what's to come, what the Pisces Virgo cycle is going to bring. And since it's a lunar eclipse, and it's a lunar eclipse in Pisces, it's the first in the cycle, as you mentioned, the very first before the nodes move in. Yeah, I think like keeping a journal or paying attention to your dreams, you could have like really interesting dreams, visions, experiences in meditation. And I've heard you say this before, and it's totally right. Anything that feels, and I feel like during this eclipse it's very true. Anything that feels coincidental, or that feels like a sign, is a sign. There
Mhm.
are like no coincidences around this time. There's a lot of the universe. Everything can feel like a sign, and the universe is really, or God, whatever, it's really trying to show you something and reveal to you what is to come. So stay open to that. You can have a real perspective shift, or there can be shifts in your yeah, the way that you see your existing situation could totally change. That'll give you an indication as well as of what's to come in 2025. And you're right too, where this I think is definitely going to activate those Saturn Neptune influences collectively. And even in our personal lives, it can make any Saturn Neptune like issues or stuff that has come up for you more necessary to address.
Yeah, and the good and the bad. So it could
For
be,
sure.
this is just like the next phase in your spiritual journey.
Mm,
This could be the next phase in, this is also a really creative energy, this Saturn Neptune. So this could be the next phase in like doing something really creative and making it tangible, like doing something creative that's practical or turning it into something real. Like that's like Saturn Neptune is taking imagination and translating that into reality. And this full moon, this eclipse could be a really great time for that.
yeah, agreed.
All right. So we have one more big eclipse that's happening. Um, Solar annual eclipse that's happening on October 2nd. There it is. But yeah, so this is going to be the last eclipse of the year that's happening in Libra and in Aries. And this one's interesting to me because it's in a very close conjunction with Mercury. Mercury is going to be combust at this time. And this is also in square with Mars. To me, this feels like a very anxious, very frazzled energy where our brains are going to be going a mile a minute. And that's going to negate the ability for us to like really discern, to see things clearly, to stay grounded at this time. And so this is a time that everybody really needs to double down on their self-care practices.
Mm.
So make sure that you're regulating your nervous system, make sure you're breathing, make sure you're, doing physical activity with that Mars square to Mercury to get some of that energy out, and you'll get through it a lot more easily.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the biggest thing that I saw from this too, because it's so close to Mercury, is anxiety, overthinking, feeling kind of
Mhm.
like stuck in your head. So having positive outlets and even like physical outlets, writing, hanging out with your friends. You don't need to know. I think things can feel, even though it's a solar eclipse and it's like a new beginning, things can still feel confusing. Um, if you don't know everything, you can um, if everything is not clear as far as like what the new beginning is or how you're going to get there at around the time of the eclipse, that's okay. Don't overwhelm yourself with thoughts and worries. Just kind of wait for it, because you can feel very overloaded as far as your nervous system, and just a little bit on edge. So do anything that you can to kind of take the edge off. And eclipses, I usually see them as sort of they're when fate steps in. We don't have to feel like we have to like do something or take advantage. um just allow and then assimilate to the changes later when they become more clear. But this can be like that confusing kind of energy where it can be like, oh, I need to be doing something but I'm not sure what. It's like, just give yourself a break and a breather. And I believe, is it the last eclipse in Libra? We have one more in Aries, right?
Next year.
Right. So I think it's not the end of this cycle or the end of this
No.
storyline that's been activated, but it's there can feel like things are shutting down a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And as much as as much as I want to frame this in a more positive fashion, I do think that there could be external challenges that come up. This to me feels like passive aggressive words being exchanged.
Mm,
This could be fighting, disagreements, arguments, disputes. That's pretty standard with Mars square Mercury. Or this could
yeah.
be just a rapid influx of information. It's like information overload. Everybody's telling you so many different things, or on the collective, it's like there's so much information coming out right now that everybody's brains are jumbled. And this could bring more around, war and different, political topics and things like that that should be coming up around this time too. But yeah, it's if as long as you are keeping your calm
Yeah,
and you're
that's the
staying
most
out of the circus, because there's going to be a lot right there, I think everyone will be okay.
yeah, I think so too. And I think that there will definitely I think every this eclipse cycle in Aries and Libra is very much tied to the war that's going on.
Yeah.
So there will be more, and this information probably that is revealed around that. And yes, it's a stay in your lane kind of eclipse. Don't engage,
Mhm.
because Mars square Mercury, yeah, of course it can be disagreements, disputes, people kind of like wanting to get a rise out of you, or wanting you to give them an answer right now, right now. Don't wait. And it's, don't allow yourself to be like tugged under the like by or rushed by other people, and the undertow of that kind of like more um, combative communication.
This is like so
Right?
passive
We can
aggressive.
relate.
Like this is like the most passive aggressive combination. You have Mars in the sign of Cancer. That Mars in Cancer is always passive aggressive. Even if you
Yeah,
don't think you are and you have Mars in Cancer, you probably are.
for sure.
And then Mercury too is very indirect. It's not, as forceful as that like Aries energy. It goes about things in a more indirect way. It's more reciprocal. It's less overt. And so you combine those two energies in this really tight square. I think to me, this is just like a lot of really passive aggressive energy. That's all I see here.
Yeah, yeah. It's stay in your lane. Don't
Yes.
engage unless you have to. Just
Don't,
wait.
yeah, absolutely. And then, we're wrapping up the year with a Mars retrograde in Leo and in Cancer. And so this is actually going to last until February of 2025. So we'll just touch on it real quick. We don't have to go wild with this, but Mars is going to oppose Pluto. It's going to trine Neptune. It's going to sextile Uranus, square Chiron, trine Saturn. It's hitting all of the major players that we just talked about. So everything we just talked about, you guys, from December 6th of 2024 through February 23rd of 2025, it will be activated over and over and over again in a variety of new and exciting ways.
Right. Yeah. Um, and even before that, like before Mars starts its retrograde period, it's very active in 2024. It's going to come into a conjunction with Pluto, a conjunction with Saturn, a conjunction with Uranus. You know, it's so if you're ruled by Mars or like me and you, um,
Yeah.
or Mars is your time lord in 2024 at some point, like pay attention to Mars's movements because they're going to have a big effect on you, especially the Mars retrograde, which is always in some way generally a period of like a slowdown, but a necessary slowdown. It's
Mhm.
another sort of like indicator or just representation of we can't just be growing, growing, going, moving, 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 doing, doing, doing. We need periods of reflection and revision in order to be successful. And but Mars retrogrades can sometimes feel like frustrating because things that we want to move forward with are not moving forward. Especially if Mars is like your chart ruler or if it rules your 10th house of career, something that you really want to the ascendant ruler is like the physical body and the midheaven is career, but whatever, um, just know that the Mars retrograde is a period of like a forced but necessary slowdown to rethink, to rewrite the action plan wherever Mars is transiting in your chart, in Cancer and Leo both. There can definitely be some anxiety and some frustration, but it's a sort of a necessary pause.
Yeah, it's a hesitation before taking action.
Yeah.
That's Mars retrograde. Um, so yeah, it's as long as you're not plunging ahead too crazy. And this could
Mm,
be a really great time also, like if you're somebody who just needs to constantly be taking action, this is a good time to react. Like not react, but like reenact something. So it's like you took an action before, it didn't work out the first time, you're bringing it back into the mix and you're starting it over. So like a restart would be a good way to think about it. So this is like a good time for a restart of something or multiple restarts of things that you have let fall by the wayside that you started in the past and they didn't work out for you. Maybe you've had time to like sit with it, refine the actions that you've taken in the past and, start new. So this can be a time for really powerful action, but if it's something that's brand new in your brain and you've never thought about it before and you've never done it before, this is not the time to do it. The time to do it is after Mars goes direct. But if it's something that you've done before and you're bringing it back into the mix and, maybe it didn't work out so well the first time, it could work way better with Mars in retrograde. As long as it's something that you're redoing. So yeah, so it's not all about just stagnancy.
mm. Yeah, no, revamping, reimagining something that has been done before, or
Yeah.
that you have done before, but you didn't have time for, or it didn't work out that time. Yeah, you can because retrogrades allow us to see things from a different perspective, see the same thing from a different level or a different angle, and kind of like make changes from that place of a changed or altered perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, all right. That's pretty much it for the year. I mean, I feel like that's plenty. We've been going for a while, haven't we?
There was a lot to cover.
Yeah, I mean, as there would be, but
Yeah.
so I mean, big picture, you guys, this is a year where we're going to be letting go of stuff that we don't need anymore. There's going to be some volatility, some change, but a lot of really big, really powerful new opportunities that are going to come as a surprise to all of us. And this is going to be a year where I think the only constant is change. Like we're going to be shifting, growing, changing, letting things go. The end of this year is not going to look anything like the start of this year on a collective level, on a personal level. And so as long as you're here for that, as long as you're ready for that, as long as you can embrace that, then I mean this could be a really incredible year for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. I think that we're really entering a new era and we're feeling that we're entering a new era. And so being open to um, um, making changes that you recognize are necessary for you and opening up to new like opportunities and possibilities that maybe feel uncomfortable, but you know, on some level that they'll be good for you and that you need. So following your intuition there and just being um, comfortable in the kind of frenetic, no solid ground to stand on, but see it as exciting rather than scary.
Yeah, roll with the punches.
Roll with it. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, so for being here with us and for sharing all of your astrological wisdom. Once again, if you want to check out Zoe's work, she does actually do readings. So she's a consulting astrologer. I'll post the link down below. Definitely get a reading from her if you want to learn all about your personal astrology for 2024. And yeah, I think we're good here. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was amazing. Thanks for having me again. This is my second time and I hope I'm back. But this was super fun. I loved this. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.